I know it's really hard to not be one of the people that loses a ton of weight in the very beginning, but 4 years later, almost 4 years later, I am so much healthier. Just stick with
Mhm.
it. Do it for
Yeah.
something more than the weight loss.
Hey guys, thank you so much for watching our videos. If you'd like to support us some more, you can explore our homemade natural skincare products at purelytallow.com. Thank you so much for supporting my small business. Hey everybody, welcome to the Carnivore Revolution. I'm Serena, and today my special guest is Donna Green. Donna is a carnivore, a cancer survivor, and a friend. Donna, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. We finally get to do this.
I
Great.
know, me too. I don't know why it took so long because we talk all the time. We're fast friends online. But it's
Right?
really interesting how that works because you feel like you're actually friends with people, but you also feel like you're talking all the time because we go back and forth all the time. We comment on each other's things. We do
Right.
lots of stuff together. And then you're like, wait a minute, I've never sat down and had an actual like face to face conversation.
I
So I'm
know.
excited about this one. I like to start with people's journeys. So, like your backstory, like how you ended up here. And I know yours is a really good one. So, let's start there.
Okay, that sounds
Yeah.
good. So in 2018, I was diagnosed with sarcoma on the back of my thigh and adrenal insufficiency. And I went through all the treatment. I went through surgery. I went through radiation treatment. And while I was going through radiation treatment, they put me on what they called a nutritional keto diet. And it included so many vegetables. I cannot even tell you the amount of vegetables I was eating every day. And it was low fat and lean meat, no red meat, chicken, fish, stuff like that, and lots of fruit, vegetables. And after I finished up my radiation treatment, I didn't heal. My burn on the back of my leg was awful. It looked like a piece of rare meat, and it didn't heal, and I just kept feeling like I was getting sicker and sicker, and I was on steroid replacement for the adrenal insufficiency, and it just felt like it was getting worse. I was trying to work. I was having crises at work, and so I retired, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to work, but I can't like not live my life. How am I gonna, get through the day? So I happened to Google one day, where do you go from keto? And boom, popped up this carnivore. It was funny because I remember talking to my husband like 6 months prior, telling him, hey, I heard about this carnivore thing. And he was like, just eat meat? No. I go, yeah, I know. I don't, that's probably not the thing for me to do.
It's
Right.
probably not healthy.
Right, exactly. You know, what everybody says about
Yeah.
fat and red meat. So when I Googled that, I found Bella, the steak and butter gang. I started there and I started getting better very quickly. I started getting better. My leg finally healed. It took a few months, but I had like all these aches and pains from all the medication I was on. At the time, I was on 21 medications and 10 skin cream.
That's
I
crazy.
had gotten this like autoimmune issues where my skin would just break out in these rashes for no reason at all, and it would just stay there. So when I started carnivore, that slowly went away. I'd say within like 6 months, my skin was clear. My leg was pretty much healed. I felt good. I felt like I had energy. I wasn't really one of the lucky ones that lost like a ton of weight in the beginning.
Mhm.
Mostly, probably I would say like the first 18 months of my journey was mostly healing, which who doesn't like that? I mean,
Right.
I had so much energy and I had done, oh my gosh, I had done, you know, I was a pre-diabetic. My doctor was like, lose weight or go on insulin. And he prescribed me HCG, which is that human growth
Yeah.
hormone.
Mhm.
I did that for almost a year and I lost a lot of weight. But when I got sick, I gained probably half of that weight back.
Mhm.
So I had done, I mean, I'm the epitome of a yo-yo dieter. I've done it
Yeah.
all, pills, shakes, you name it. Um, and I've stuck to carnivore because I feel better, even though I haven't lost a lot of weight as far as like pounds go. here I am almost 4 years into my journey. I still weigh in the 190s, but I went from like a size 26 to a size 12,
Amazing.
and I'm on zero medication. Well, that's not true. I did just recently start to use my inhaler for asthma. I think I did a story about that on my Instagram. I hadn't had any problems with my asthma until just recently, so I've
Mhm.
had to kind of go back onto an inhaler. So I guess
Mhm.
carnivore doesn't mean bulletproof, right?
Right. Right.
But it's not 27 medications, and it's certainly not slathering, steroid ointment on my skin every day.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of how I found it. And man, I feel super
Yeah.
lucky to have found carnivore.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and not a day goes by where I don't tear up just a little bit thinking about how far I've come mentally. Like, just the idea that I am not in that low fat, ultra, restrictive, very few calorie mode that I had been in for, 37 years. Like my whole adult life, I was in that mode of always being on a diet. And what do you say to people who are critical of that? Like, well, you're still on a diet. This is still a diet. It's like, what do you say to people that give you a hard time for that?
So in the very beginning, it was really hard for me because my parents didn't like it. I have a twin
Mhm.
sister. She didn't like it. Everybody was very in my life, in my work life, my personal life, were very, very critical of what I was doing.
Mhm.
My husband was super supportive though, because he had seen me go from um, at the very end of my radiation treatment, I told him, I'm like, I'm in so much pain and I'm so sick that I
Mhm.
have to find something or just put a bullet in my head and let's just be
Right.
done. I go, I can't continue to live like this. And so he's kind of seen me go from like my lowest point to a point in my life where we just had a super stressful event, and I recovered like that. There
Yeah.
was no binge eating,
Yeah.
no using food for that stressful
Mhm.
moment. So in the beginning I used to just tell people, hey, I feel better doing this. Now I don't even have those conversations.
Right.
Now when people talk to me about carnivore, I'm like, hey, listen, I were sitting here and I were eating a big salad or a big thing of donuts, you would have nothing to say to me. So
Okay.
I'm going to sit here and eat my steak, and do me a favor. Don't have anything to say to me now, because
Mhm.
you didn't care when I was eating this other way. Now you don't get to have an opinion when I am obviously healthier than I've ever been. And
Mhm.
I'm 56 years old.
Yeah.
And I can't remember ever in my life feeling as well as I feel right now today. I I can't even emotionally, always with depression and um anxiety, anger issues. I don't have any of those things now. I wish I knew in my 20s what I knew now. So now I just don't have the conversation. I try to tell people when they ask how much better I feel. um, if they'll listen, I tell my story. Usually, if I tell them kind of where I came from to now, they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to explain, but if they're too critical, I just cut them off and
Yeah.
keep doing what I'm doing. I've got super high cholesterol. I don't care. I feel better. I don't care.
Yeah, and I think the cholesterol thing, I think, first of all, we don't really know what high cholesterol is. We don't know what
Right.
number is unhealthy. Used to be 300 was the unhealthy number, and now it's 200 because the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies want that number to be lower, and people who are not conspiracy theorists are not gonna agree with it, but it's a fact that by lowering that number, they get more people to take medication, and that
Oh,
adds
yeah.
money to the insurance companies and to the pharmaceutical companies, and that is an
Oh,
absolute
yeah.
fact. We didn't
And, when I went to the endocrinologist to find out what the adrenal insufficiency was, because I had so much fatigue, I found out that they didn't really know. They attributed it to inhaled corticosteroids. And I was like, really? Because yeah, I have asthma, but I don't really use my steroid inhaler as prescribed, right?
Mhm.
So I'm like, wow, that's kind of weird. And they did a CT scan, and I found out that my pituitary gland was very small. When I went off of the statins, so I started working with Danny. I told her that one of my biggest goals was to get off all this medication. And I really wanted to heal my adrenal insufficiency. And it was with Danny Conway that I found out about the steroid, the
Mhm.
LDL cholesterol steroid pathway, your hormone pathway. And I was like, that's interesting. So when I finally got off of the steroids, or I mean, off of the statins, and off of the steroids, I went back. I was going in like every 6 months for a CT scan of my chest, my head, and my legs, for my cancer treatment. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, it was noted in one of my MRI scans that my pituitary gland had grown.
Interesting.
So, and it was at that time that I started I think I was on maybe 2.5 milligrams of hydrocortisone, and
Mhm.
my adrenals were making um cortisol. So I think my total cholesterol right now is over 500. It could be 1,000. My mom
Mm.
is 75 years old. Her
Wow.
CAC scan is 0. So her heart scan, she got a 0 score. So
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I it taking statins is certainly not healthy by
Mhm.
any stretch of the imagination, and definitely if that's a money-making machine. And I attribute a lot of the health problems that I've had to taking all the different medications, because I was on statins, I'd have a side effect, and then I was on another medication. That's how you end up on 27 medications,
Mhm.
because they're just like,
Yeah.
hey, we've got
Mhm.
something for that.
Yeah. And
Right.
it's interesting, because, like, first of all, if high cholesterol is of your only marker of heart disease, even though there is no absolute proof, there has never been any proof that that is an indication of higher risk of heart disease. There's not any proof of that. People just say it. But anyway, if that is your only health marker that isn't good according to your doctor, there is no reason to treat that, and there is no reason to assume that you're at a higher risk for any kind of cardiac events if that is your only marker. Now, if you have 5 markers and your cholesterol is high, maybe it's something to look at. But even then, fix everything you can without taking medications. And chances are any of those issues can be fixed with carnivore. And it seems crazy. I know. Okay. So did you see what Dr. Sean Baker posted? I think it was yesterday. He posted a cholesterol level tested at 5 p.m. the other day at 24 hours fasted. And then later on at 37 hours fasted plus 1 hour of cardio. So at 5 p.m. with 24 hours fasted, it was 156. People would
Wow.
praise you and say, that's wonderful, right? He
Right.
continued to fast for another 13 hours and added in 1 hour of cardio, and it was 346. So
Wow.
in the first one, they're going to say, great job, you're at low risk. And at the second one, they're going to want to, take
Put
you
him on.
back. Yeah, they're gonna
Yeah.
do exploratory surgery and put you on a medication, and the only difference was the fact that he continued to fast and then exercised.
Right.
And there have been a lot of studies like that. Dave Feldman, people should look up Dave Feldman and the lipid energy model. They have done lots of experiments and had their cholesterol levels vary vastly in a week or two by just eating different things and
Oh,
or
yeah.
fasting. So you can't go by the cholesterol levels
Mm-mm.
anyway, because they can vary. Like, I could go in this morning fasted and get one number and then eat a couple of hamburgers with some butter on them and go back later and get a completely different number. So there is no way to really test cholesterol
No.
and get a good number anyway.
And I think it depends on the labs too. And I love Dave Feldman's new study is so exciting. That
Yeah.
is so exciting. But I just went like 6 months ago, and I went into Sonora Quest and got some labs taken because my insurance wouldn't pay for it. And it was
Mhm.
cheaper to do the one that included the cholesterol. Then I
Mhm.
went into my endocrinologist's office the same day, 30 minutes later, and got
Mhm.
some cholesterol lipid panel done by her. So, I mean, not only does it change depending on if you're exercising, it changes depending on who the lab is.
Even if that information does come to light, think about the process that it takes to change over the My Plate. Is that what we use now? Is the My
Yeah,
Plate with the
my
percentages on it, right?
right,
And the food pyramid. Think about what it would take to change those. You're talking about changing the food system, not just changing what people eat, but changing the food system in schools, nursing homes, colleges, the
right,
military, hospitals, all of those places that have to follow those rules. Like when you're a diabetic and you're in the hospital because of a diabetic event, and they bring you toast with the jelly and orange juice and oatmeal and one piece of bacon, and then tell you just
right.
to dose yourself the appropriate amount of insulin, that's not really how it's supposed to work, right? But that meal is dictated by somebody and by something, and it's either the pyramid or it's My Plate, it's the SAD diet, it's the nutritional guidelines that they have to follow. They have to follow those guidelines, and that's what dictates what people in all of those places eat.
I don't know, 10 years from now, they discover carnivore's better and we might want to change things. Look at all the pocketbooks we're hitting.
Yes.
At that point, there's like the money issue,
Mhm.
who's going to want to, Procter and Gamble and all these big food companies, they're not going to want to get on board with that because that hits them right in the pocketbook.
Yeah.
So even if they were to say that, I think there's still, even if we weren't 20 years behind,
Mhm.
it would be an act of Congress practically to change the way we feed kids in school, things like that. That just because there's a money issue. People are going to lose profit and
Yeah.
nobody
It
wants that.
it quite literally will take an act of Congress.
Yeah,
Quite
you're
literally.
right. Totally
Um,
agree.
yeah, and also for people watching, like you mentioned, some of the larger food companies are Procter and Gamble. Like, you don't want, we don't want studies funded by them because something like 80% of the time, if a study is funded by an industry, the findings that they come out with after the study are have a favorable outcome according to who funded it. So let's say
Right.
Coca-Cola funds a study on whether or not sugar is bad for you. That study is never going to come back ever. That study never had a chance of coming back saying sugar is bad for you. And that's really sad that the government themselves cannot figure out how to eliminate the conflicts of interest and create their own studies with scientists who are not being paid by any of those companies, so that we can have actual, real information about what's making people sick.
Yeah,
It's really
it's
sad.
mind-boggling. When I finally started carnivore, and I am more animal-based now. I have added things back into my diet, a few things, not regularly, but I
Mhm.
have a few things that I have added back into my diet. But I remember when I became carnivore, when I realized how I got sick, when I really started, I think the very first book I read was Ben Bickman's Why We Get Sick.
Mhm.
When I read that and realized what the issues were, I was like, oh my God,
Mhm.
how does my doctor not understand this? How do people, food companies, doctors, how do we not know this? How are we not all in the know? I
Yeah.
felt, you know, I was like, oh my God, I feel so betrayed. I feel
Right.
like somebody stabbed me right in the back. And I
Yeah.
talk to my kids. I mean, none of my kids will do carnivore. No one else in my family except for my mom is a carnivore. And the only reason that my mom went carnivore is because she was seeing the doctor having blood transfusions because her red blood cell, she was not making red blood cells. And I was like, Mom, you've been a vegetarian, you've been a vegan half your life. I'm like, you're not making red blood cells because you're sick. You need to eat meat. I'm like,
Mhm.
trust me, let's just do this. And she's like, well, they want me to go on medication and they want me to do blood transfusions. And I'm like, Mom, you've watched me. Please just eat red meat. And she really likes meat more than
Mhm.
she likes
Mhm.
vegetables, right? So
Yeah.
when I finally talked her into it, boom, all of a sudden, when she went in for her next tests and possible blood transfusion, they were like, yeah, you're fine. Boom, she's a carnivore. And
Amazing.
And it was just interesting to me that even with that, how do you not understand that this woman is not eating enough protein to make
Right.
red blood cells anyway? She's a vegan.
Yeah.
Hello,
Right.
I think it's just mind-boggling that
Yeah.
more doctors, more people don't just admit, well, okay, we know this is the case, but we don't want you to do that. I would be,
Right.
I would feel better if they would just say that,
Right.
you know,
If they
just
would just be
say,
honest. Yeah.
yeah, just be honest and tell me that you need me to fund your yacht. Just tell me that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Or, you think like, could they tell people like secretly? Could they tell people how they should eat? You know what I mean? Like the idea that a doctor can't give any other kind of nutrition advice than like the regular standard nutrition advice is just crazy. But doctors don't have a lot of nutritional background. They don't have a lot of training, something like 6 or 8 hours in the entire time they're in medical school. And I believe that nutrition should be a huge part of getting your medical license. If they had to make it take an extra year to get your medical license, then by golly, they should make it take an extra year because
Absolutely.
we are what we eat. And that's just such an old, cliche thing to say, but we totally are what we eat.
And how do we not know that? How do they not know
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
How do we not realize that our grandparent I mean, my grandfather lived a very long time. He ate eggs and bacon every
Mhm.
day. He had a steak every day. He had a few
Mhm.
vegetables on the side. He liked avocados. There were some things like
Mhm.
that that he liked. And he didn't have any heart problems. I'm sure his cholesterol was ridiculous, but
Mhm.
he was fit and fairly thin. And he lived a long time and he lived very well. I don't understand how doctors don't see that. And I also don't, I remember when I told my primary care physician that I was going carnivore, he was like, "What is that?"
Right.
I mean, he didn't even know. I said, "Well,
Mhm.
it's kind of like a ketogenic diet. It's basically a ketogenic diet." And he was like, "A what?" Yeah, he didn't even know that much. And I considered him to be a friend, and we got along really well, and I felt like he was really caring for me. But
Mhm.
when I figured out why I was getting sick and I tried to tell him that, he was like, "How do you know this?" I said, An internet search, a quick internet search, a couple of other people to tell me, what the hormone pathway is. Does this not make sense to you?" And he's like, I would have to go back to my medical books to look at that
Well,
because
it's
they
not going
just
to be in your medical books.
right, because they don't get ongoing education. It's so funny.
Mhm.
In my job, I would have to take sexual harassment every year, and I would have to take I don't know, there'd be some new study out, and we would have to take training on that. There has to be millions of studies that come out in the medical
Mhm.
field every year. Where's the continuing education for them?
Right. Well,
Zero.
and in their defense, because we talk about this a lot about our doctor, in his defense, he's got a busy practice. They don't even accept
Right.
new patients anymore. They're so busy. So he's got a busy practice and he just barely makes it through the day. And then he goes home to his family. When do we expect him to sit down and read all of these studies? Right. I mean, there ought to be, but they can't take weeks off of work and go to,
Right.
and go to back to school. There's got to be a better way to help things catch up faster because 20 years, 20 or 30 years for the information to catch up with our current
That's such a
timeline
long
system
time.
is just ridiculous. And people are literally dying because of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed with my grandgirls, I've noticed significant issues regarding their diet. If it takes 20 years, they're going to be in their early 20s before somebody finally says to them, "You can't eat like this." And by that time, they're going to be addicted
That's
already
right.
to sugar, processed food. And for them, the process they've gosh, I don't think that they even know what a Brussels sprout is
Mhm.
because I mean, at least when I was growing up, it was fruits, whole grains, vegetables, meat.
Right.
They're growing up, it's all processed food, like,
Yeah.
well, if
Hmm.
you don't have time to cook,
Hmm.
get chicken nuggets. And then you look at a box of chicken nuggets and you're
Hmm.
like, this
What in the
isn't
world?
even food.
That's right.
And so that's what they're living on. I mean,
Hmm.
they don't even have they don't even have what I had, where at least they had somebody at home cooking for them, some kind of whole food, maybe not the best, but at least whole food. They are living on an all processed food diet basic.
Yeah, and I think if people went back to like you were talking, at least when you were younger, it was whole grains, fruits, vegetables, and meats. If people went back to eating like that, the pharmaceutical companies would go out of business because that was
Mhm.
so much healthier than the way we're eating now. We were
Right.
at a basketball game the other day, and I watched a little girl eat a bag of pretzels and then a bag of gummies, just regular, store-bought gummies from the grocery store that were filled with artificial stuff, and then one of those squeezy pouches, and then she had a candy bar, and that was her dinner. Oh, and chicken nuggets from McDonald's. That was her dinner.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
I
when
just
my the
thought,
only
that's
thing that I
crazy.
can say for my kids, I mean, between my husband and I, we have 11 grandkids, and
Mhm,
several, a couple of them are already, young adults. But for our youngest grandkids that come and visit, we don't have, I mean, my husband eats that kind of food, but
mhm,
when the kids come, they are not allowed to have that. That is in Papa's refrigerator, or that is in Papa's pantry, and that is
mhm,
not for them. If you want to eat, you eat from Grandma's pantry, you eat from Grandma's refrigerator.
mhm,
So we don't do that. We don't do the pizzas. We don't do chicken nuggets. I don't do any of that. I cook for them, and I'm like, this is what you're having when you're here. I try
mhm,
to we don't have soda, we don't have juice, we don't have
mhm,
Crystal Light, we don't have any of that. It is water. If they want a little bit of flavor to their water, I have LMNT that I'm welcome, that I'm happy to share with them. And
mhm,
that's, so if they're here with me for a week, that's what they get. Carnivore foods, a little bit of veggies, and
mhm.
that's pretty much it. And that's really all I've been able to do with our kids and grandkids. But I'm not going to like continue to foster their
Right.
we're eating chicken nuggets from the frozen food section.
Yeah,
Not doing that,
yeah,
and I tell Scott, you need to keep your food in your pantry. We don't share with the grandkids. So
yeah.
hopefully
That's
they'll
awesome.
learn a little bit from that.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, they
hope
do
so.
say a few things. I did have my granddaughter for the longest time. She was eating meat at school. She stayed with me for 2 weeks, and then I got her on a pretty much all meat diet. She had avocados, meat, and I want to say there was something, oh, berries.
Mhm.
And so I showed her mom how to pack, and she got so much teasing at school in the lunchroom that she was like, I'm not doing this, Grandma. They tease me. They call me poor. They say there must be something wrong with me because I'm eating like that. How come I'm not eating, through the lunch line? Is my family too poor to afford that? And that just blew that right out of the water.
That's so sad. People are
It
so
was
mean.
sad, yes, and she was, like, 8 or 9 at the time, and she was like, "I'll try it, Grandma, I'll try it, I like meat," because she can't stand vegetables. She doesn't
Mhm,
like vegetables, she likes berries, she doesn't really like apples or bananas or any of that
mhm.
kinda stuff, so it was kind of perfect at the time, but
Yeah,
now with that, now she's eating processed food lunch, and she's just this processed food child.
that's terrible.
It's
So sad.
awful.
Yeah, really sad. Okay, Donna, if you had a couple of book recommendations for people, what would they be?
I would start with the Why We Get Sick by Ben Bikman. That is
It's a
such
good
a
one.
good book. And I actually am going through it. I just recently got the Judy Cho's
Oh, yeah.
uh, it's very good. There's some really good recipes in the back by Laura Spath, and
Oh, awesome.
this is really very good. I actually started my carnivore journey, and I still would recommend this. I started my carnivore journey on Paul Saladino's book and Sean Baker's book. That those
Okay.
were the first two that I ever bought, in addition to Ben Bickman. So I think those are all worth the read. My bookshelf, my bookshelf is full of books on nutrition, carnivore books. Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
there's so
Yeah.
many, but those are, I think, are the ones that I would
Okay, and one piece
definitely.
of advice for people?
If I had one piece of advice, I would say just stick with it. Um, I know it's really hard to not be one of the people that loses a ton of weight in the very beginning, but 4 years later, almost 4 years later, I am so much healthier. Just stick with
Mhm.
it. Do it for
Yeah.
something more than the weight loss. I mean, I don't know that you need to find your why that makes you cry thing, but find a reason to just stick with it because you're just worth more than the binge eating and the yo-yo dieting. It will help you, it will work, but you could maybe be one of those people that it takes a little bit longer. So don't give up on yourself.
And if it's not working, like you said, stick with it. Kelly Hogan always says she came for the vanity and stayed for the sanity. And I think
Yeah,
that's what happens. Because for me, I gained 18 pounds in the beginning. And
right.
so I think that that's what happens. But I felt so good. I just kept thinking, this is going to work. This is going to work. This is going to work. And eventually it did. And I got a lot healthier along the way. So I think that's great advice. So, Donna,
Yeah,
tell people, sorry, go ahead.
I think that, and I don't think that everybody's carnivore looks the same. I remember when I used to think that I must not be doing it right, even
Yeah.
though I felt like I was doing it fine and I would
Yeah.
see how other people do it. So I think that, you just got to find what works for you because it's not going to look exactly the same as somebody else's. You really need to experiment and see what works for you and go
Yeah.
from there.
I agree. Now tell people where they can find you.
So you can find me on Facebook. I'm Donna Green, and on Instagram, I'm woman.hunter carnivore, woman hunter carnivore. What I
Okay.
am.
Okay, awesome. Donna, thank you so much for doing this with me today. It was really great.
Thanks for having me. It was so much fun. Long overdue.
Long overdue. And thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time on the Carnivore Revolution.